in this niche, you make your money on the buy. I mean, in real estate, we make our money on the buy. And because the transactions are very small, and we're such an inefficient model, we're averaging 300 to 1,000% returns on investment. The only way to really fail in this business is to quit.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. As entrepreneurs, we're always looking for ways to scale, to grow, and to build a bigger business, right? How can we do things? I really gain back time, right? Or make sure we're focused on the highest producing activities or that's for our time. It's always a fight for me, which you'll hear me talk about on the show often. But today, our guest, he has scaled and has done it well. He is in a little different business model, but he's syndicating land and he's flipping land and at a very big scale. He's completed, I think he said over 6,000 land deals, transactions. His name is Mark Podolsky, managing member and coaching education platform at The Land Geek, managing director at Frontier Properties, and founder at geekplay.io. He's a host of The Art of Passive Income, author of Dirt Rich, which he has another book coming out, which you'll hear him mention as well. But he's made a massive business out of flipping land and created a process where most people could go and figure it out, it seems. And so it's a great conversation around building and scaling his business, but that could be applied to our business, to my business. We've done some of these same exact things in LifeBridge Capital and the podcasting stuff, podcasting production team that we have that's producing for lots of people now as well. There's so many things here that can go across any business model as an entrepreneur nearly, but you're going to learn a lot from Mark today. I love talking about building and scaling businesses. It's something that excites me. I've read tons of books on it. And it's like I read something, I'm trying to implement something, right? I read something, trying to implement something. Or our guest today has done just that. And not only that, he's writing books about it as well. We've had him on the show before, and I'm looking forward to this conversation also. He's an expert in this space. And Mark, welcome back.
Whitney, thank you so much for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, honored to have a conversation with you again. And your specialty, Mark, has been the land deals, right? The land flipping, and now also teaching people to do that successfully. And for our listeners who aren't maybe familiar with you or didn't hear the other show, maybe give us a high level what that is. And maybe give us a little background first. And then I want to talk about what land flipping is, and then how you've scaled that. We're going to dive into how you've really scaled it. But okay, first, who's Mark?
Yeah. So we'll talk about the sexiest real estate niche ever, land. But so who's Mark? So if we rewind the tape in 2000, I was a miserable, micromanaged, 45-minute commute to work and back investment banker specializing in mergers and acquisitions with private equity groups. And Whitney, I think you remember this. I hated it. And it got so bad for me that I wouldn't get the Sunday blues anticipating Monday coming around. I get the Friday blues anticipating the weekend going by really fast and having to be back at work on Monday. So my firm hires this guy and he's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land at tax deed auctions. He's flipping them online and he's making a 300% return on his investment. And I'm looking at companies all day long, and a great company has like 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow. Average company's 10%. I'm looking at companies all day long, less than 10%. So of course, I don't believe him. I've got 3 grand saved up for car repairs. I go to New Mexico with him. I do exactly what he tells me to do. By 10 half-acre parcels, an average price of $300 each. I flip them online, and they all sell for an average price of $1,200 each. It worked, 300%. So I took all that money, went to another auction, and this is in Arizona where I live. And again, it's 2000. There's no one in the room. I'm buying up lots and acres for nothing. I sell all that land. I made over $90,000 cash. So I go to my wife. I said, honey, and she's pregnant. I'm going to quit my job and become a full-time land investor. And she says, absolutely not. So I said, okay, okay. So it took me about 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit. I've been doing it full-time ever since. I've done over 6,000 transactions and growing. And really the way that I do it now is I want to make a cash flow. And so Whitney, if you want, I can just walk you through that model really quickly.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for all of us, listeners included, just to understand a little more in case they haven't heard of you before.
Sure. So Whitney, where do you live?
I'm in Virginia.
You're in Virginia. Okay, so I'm gonna assume that you own 10 acres of raw land in Colorado, and you owe $200 in back taxes. So you're advertising 2 important things to me. Number 1, you have no emotional attachment to the raw land. You're in Virginia, properties in Colorado. And number 2, you're distressed financially in some weird way because we don't pay for things like our property taxes. We don't value them in the same way. As a result, the county treasurer keeps sending you notices saying, Whitney, if you don't pay your property taxes, you're going to lose that property to a tax deed or a tax lien investor. So all I'm going to do is look at the comparable sales on your parcel for the last 12 to 18 months. I'm going to take the lowest comparable sale. Let's say it's $10,000 and it would divide by 4. And that's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. So I send you an offer for $2,500. Now you accept it. Why? Because for you, $2,500 is better than potentially nothing. Now, in reality, 3 to 5% of people will accept my quote unquote top dollar offer. But now that you've accepted it, I'm going to go through due diligence or in depth research, confirm you still own the property, confirm back taxes are only $200, make sure there's been no breaks in the chain of title, no liens or encumbrances, this whole big property checklist. I'm going to outsource it to my team in Jamaica. Costs about 11 bucks. But if it was $5,000 or more, I would just close traditionally through a title company. But this is a little deal, $2,500. I'll use my team. They're connected to an American title company. And we'll assume that everything checks out. So I send you a check for $2,300, the treasurer $200. I own it free and clear. And now I'm going to make it cash flow like a rental home. So I have a built-in best buyer. I'm going to sell it in 30 days or less. So Whitney, do you remember who the best buyer is?
Who's that?
The neighbors, the
Oh my
neighbors.
goodness. Yeah.
So I'm gonna send out neighbor letters saying, "Hey, here's your opportunity, protect your privacy, protect your views, know your neighbor." So oftentimes the neighbors will buy it. Now, if they pass, I'll go to my buyers list. They pass, I'll go to a website you may have heard of. It's called Craigslist, 15th most trafficked website in the United States. I'll go to one I know you've heard of called Meta or Facebook, the buy sell groups, the marketplace. And then I go to the lands, landmodo.com, landsofamerica.com, landandfarm.com, landflip.com, landhelp.com. These are platforms where people buy and sell raw land. But the secret is in the pricing. I'm going to make it irresistible. So all I'm going to ask for is a $2,500 down payment. So I'm going to get my money out on the down payment, and then I'm making a car payment. Let's say $297 a month at 9% interest for the next 84 months. So I have this one-time sale, and then I get $297 a month for the next 84 months. No renters, no rehabs, no renovations, no rodents. And because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, and the SAFE Act, all this onerous real estate legislation. So it's a simple game. Can we create enough land notes where our passive income exceeds our fixed expenses? And now we're working because we want to, not because we have to.
Well, how did you find me? You're in Arizona and I'm in Virginia.
So I go to your county and I get it's public information and I get a list of the real property owners. And then I'm gonna scrub that list, let's say by use code, let's say by VL for vacant land. And now I just have all the owners that own property in that county. And then from there, I'm gonna upload that list to my software, which is called LG Pass, the Land Geek proprietary automated software system, right? Shameless plug. And then it's gonna automate sending out offers and then take people step by step through that entire process there. But it's important. I mean, whether you use an LG Pass, you want to use software to automate this so you can scale, which is
Yeah.
one of the things I want to talk about in Dirt Rich 2, how to scale your land business without skipping a beat. And I think the software pieces are a really important piece of it.
No doubt about it. Yeah. I love building, scaling, thinking through how to do that. It sounds like you've used virtual assistants and employing people in other countries to do this, just like we've done in some different ways. But you mentioned even right then, you said, I think your team was in Jamaica, cost $11 to do due diligence.
Yeah,
Huh?
that's right.
Wow, that's impressive. I want to dive in though to the building and scaling, exactly what we're talking about right here. It's like, so you figured out the process to buy this piece of land, or really to find it, right? And to be able to buy it, acquire it at a great deal, but then cheap enough that you can still sell it for a great deal so you can move it fast, right? And then But not only you're not sitting there, you and your wife, you're not sitting there every night, right, doing all this yourself. That wouldn't be very scalable, and maybe you were doing that early on. But yeah, let's talk about the building scaling, how you've grown, how you've moved past that and doing this at a very big scale now.
Yeah, so I think it first starts with what you're talking about with the people and the virtual assistants. And I think in the land business, there's a few key people that you want to have in place. The first key person is that intake manager. So the intake manager, so when you send out an offer, so in our scenario, Whitney, when I send you out an offer, well, you might receive that offer. You might have questions about it. You might be confused about it. You might want to call and yell at me. You might want to send it back and accept it. But I don't make any money talking to the sellers. So the intake manager will handle that role and they will work with you, the seller, on that parcel and explain the offer, explain the process of how we're going to go through due diligence and close with you as a seller. So that's a really key piece right there is that intake part. Now, once we've gone through intake and we own the property, the intake manager might be the one to actually close it logistically. We might use software like simplifile.com where we can digitally close it, or it might be our acquisition manager. So our acquisition manager might then get handed off from the intake manager. Now that they're going to own that piece of the process and they're going to bring it to the marketing team. So we're going to have a marketing virtual assistants who we've created templates. And now with ChatGPT and AI, it's never been easier. We've got these, the best intern in the world for marketing. But essentially, we'll create a marketing process for the inexpensive virtual assistants to then start going to our marketing channels and making sure that we're getting market penetration and that we're ubiquitous and that this advertisement is on all our marketing channels. The most important one being our buyers list, because these are people that have already raised their hand and said, "Oh yeah, we're interested in buying land." And then from there in that process, as we start talking to potential buyers of our property, or we're going to move into sales. And so we have our sales team who are commission only. So they only eat what they kill. We want to keep our overhead lean and mean. And now they are closing with potential buyers. And then it's going to go back to the acquisition manager to then make sure that it's moving along in our software to make sure that we've automated the piece of the promissory note, the purchase sale agreement, the land contract, and the software that does all that in about 1 second. It used to take about 20 minutes to do all this paperwork. And then we want to set that up on our final piece of software, which is called geekpay.io. It's a set it and forget it payment system. So we want to get the ACH information from the buyer so that they can make their monthly payments on an automated basis. If they're late, they get notifications. If they want to make an early payment, they can log in and do so. But once you start scaling and you have hundreds of notes, you want to have a software program that's going to keep track of each and every one of your borrowers.
Love that. The key people. It doesn't sound like a big team though.
It's not that big, actually. It might be 5 key people. Yeah. I mean, it's as now at my scale, it's gotten way bigger. But as you first start scaling, that might be your team.
And, speak to training these people or maybe the previous level of skills that these people needed. I mean, the intake manager, I would imagine that could be a delicate conversation, right? Talking to that individual or making the deal or training them versus training somebody to do the acquisitions or sales team. What does that look like? Training and skills, the expectation of their skill level before they
Yes.
can do this.
Yeah, Whitney, such a good question. So the first thing we want to do is, for example, I want to do it myself. And I might record myself maybe via Loom or Zoom and watch the steps that I actually do and maybe record myself with, with the permission, of course, with a potential uh, seller. And then what I'm going to do is take what I've done with that seller, I'm going to transcribe it And then with the transcription, and this is actually what we're doing now, is we're prompting Chat GPT to create a standard operating procedure and become our technical writer and write out step by step each part of that process. And so now we have a very simple, tight process that we can then give to the person. And we're going to look for somebody who has good verbal skills, good communication skills, and they're going to be compensated for negotiating skills. So we might send them a book like Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss on negotiating. Or in our SOP, we might have certain negotiating type of tactics where they are motivated to get us the best price possible during due diligence. Where if we do find a flaw in something with the property, yeah, I know we offered you $2,500, but unfortunately, based on this and that, we're gonna have to do it at $2,200. And then for every, let's say, $100 they save us, they get an extra bonus hour for their hourly compensation. So we're all aligned on getting the best price. And so what we might do in that situation is we'll hire 3 people, we'll test them, and then we'll see who's putting in emotional labor, who's thinking outside the box, and we'll keep that one and go from there. And then we'll refine our process as we go along as well. And so if an 11-year-old or a 10-year-old can understand that process really well, we know we have a good process.
You mentioned Jamaica. Is there a platform you're going through to find candidates there specifically, or what platform are you using to find your virtual assistants?
So virtual assistants are typically all over the world. You could use like an upwork.com or a fiverr.com. But because we teach people how to do what we do, we have our coaching clients who are also entrepreneurial. They'll start businesses. And so 2 of them, they're best friends. They had another business and they were using Jamaican virtual assistants. And they thought, oh, why don't we teach them the land business? And so they did. And so they trained their virtual assistants and they created a company called landva4u.com based in Jamaica. They already understand the land business. They already have the intake managers, the marketing people, even sometimes sales assistants to help people grow and scale their land business.
Interesting. Yeah, that's wild. I wondered about if you were using a specific platform. I should have known somebody just created one just for this. All
Yeah,
right.
absolutely. There's another one in the Philippines. I think it's called landmasters.us. So there's like a little mini economy of virtual assistants that understand this niche.
Yeah. Well, you talked about now these people. Are there any other, or the key people that we have in place? Are there other automations that I know you named a few, but any others that we should know about, or somebody that's wanting to scale this kind of business?
Yeah. So for us, the 2 big automated pieces are going to be lgpass.com and geekpay.io. So lgpass.com handles the front end of the business, geekpay.io handles the back end of the business. As far as other softwares that we see our clients using that we like as well, there's a company called followupboss.com, which is a really great way to keep following up with your leads and closing those leads and looking at your metrics. For example, I know if I get 50 Facebook leads on one ad, that should convert to a sale. And if I get 70 leads and then it converts to a sale, I know I've got a sales issue. If I've got 30 leads and I know I've got a marketing issue, there's something that needs to change in that marketing. Maybe it's the headline, maybe it's the pricing. So we can isolate certain variables knowing our metrics, and Follow Up Boss can help with that as well.
And how do you track your metrics for all those different platforms and ads?
So the team is just sort of trained to keep track of that. And when we get a lead, we're putting that lead into our CRM. So we might use something like an active campaign to put that in. And so we'll know, okay, we got an email, that's a strong lead. When anybody asks a question, like, okay, this is a prospect, but until we get their email, they're not really a lead. And then we can throw that into our CRM. We say, oh, we've got 50 of these. This property should be selling now and know that. Now we have other people who are really good salespeople and maybe they only need 30. per ad. But our typical standard is going to be about 50 on a social media platform. On something where, like a landmoto.com, it might be 3 to 5 leads. Those are much stronger leads. These are people that are actively looking for land
Yeah.
as
No,
opposed
I
to being
love that the
interested.
metrics that detailed, right? It's that's incredible. Most do not, it seems. But any other who's we were talking about before we started recording, who, not how, right? And I'm completely behind. I got the book right up
Yeah,
there.
I've got it. I've got it right here as well.
And I followed some of Dan Sullivan's stuff, and it's eye opening, right? When you can start to think that way, and we're doing it within Lightbridge Capital as well. It's like Sam and I'm a business partner. We were doing everything at first, right? Now we got a whole team of people that are doing all those things that we were doing, but the thing is, they can do it so much better than we can do it, right? They're more skilled, but they're focused on that one thing too, versus lots of things. And so it's just being able to scale and think that way. But is there any other who's that maybe have helped you to be able to scale that way?
Well, I think a big who is just a mentor
Mm.
that has already done it and can sort of they're not emotionally attached to my business and they can scale out. And so when I'm stuck, I can go to my mentor and say, "Hey, this is what we're struggling at." Oh, okay. Well, have you thought of that? Have you thought of this? And can really help identify certain who's. But I'd say that the key who's are really going to be in the beginning, the intake manager, the due diligence team, the marketing team, the sales assistant, and then the acquisition manager to manage that team and then close the sales. And on the other end of it, the county research part of it. Because you could have the best team ever, but if you don't get your county research right in the beginning, you don't pick the right market, that whole model goes off the rails.
When do you see people that are doing this start to hire these people versus doing it themselves? Or is it something they need from the very beginning?
Well, I think that it's going to depend on how much capital you're starting with, how much time you personally have as well. So a lot of people that start in this niche, they do it as a side hustle. And so I think there's a very fine line between delegating and abdicating. And because if you're abdicating, you don't have enough depth of knowledge to
Mm,
even train the virtual assistant. And so even if you use a company like LandVA for you that are already pre-trained, you still don't even know your metrics and you still don't know how much time it should take. You could be easily taken advantage of if you personally haven't gotten into it enough. Now, there are certain aspects of the business that, okay, yeah, you don't need to know VLOOKUP if you're converting a county list to from CSV or Excel, right? So there's certain things that certainly you don't need to do. You don't have to know how to build a website or understand that piece of it. But there are certain fundamental pieces you should know well enough before you delegate it to someone else. And you should be prepared mentally to get to that next level. You understand this is going to be an investment and that to make that investment and go to that next level, it's going to be bumpy along the way.
yeah, it's there's gonna be some bumps almost in any entrepreneurial endeavor, right? Yeah. Well, real estate's no different. But
Yeah.
one thing I wanted to ask you, it seems I've heard more about land flipping right over the last maybe year, maybe 2 years, but specific more and more, right? Do you feel like there's like so many people getting into the space that maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, or even sooner, that it's going to be too populated, or how do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's such a good question because I always thought that this would always be sort of it's like the unsexiest real estate niche, right? If you go to a RIA meeting, Real Estate Investment Association meeting, there's 100 people in that room. 99 of them are going to be wholesalers, flippers, and landlords. You and I would be the only land guy in there. So I think that it's interesting that it is becoming more popular, but at the end of the day, it is a cottage industry.
Mm.
So 1,000,000 people could be in this niche. They'll all run out of money before they run out of deal flow. So because there's no private equity groups, there's no hedge funds, there's no real big money. Yeah, I'm not concerned at all. And I do think in a weird way, there is no competition in the sense that If you get 5 offers on your property, it's just validating the market. You're like, "Oh, okay. If I'm the only one doing it, there might be something wrong."
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's many good points. What I guess what have been some of the ways you've seen people fail in this? Or what did they not do, or what did they do? Were they the big mistake they made that maybe they didn't see coming?
Well, I think in this niche, you make your money on the buy. I mean, in real estate, we make our money on the buy, and because the transactions are very small, and we're such an inefficient model. I mean, we're averaging 300 to 1,000% returns on investment. The only way to really fail in this business is to quit. And so what we see happen where people fail is they just don't have the grit. And it's really difficult if you're really good at your job or as an adult to have that beginner's mind and just embrace the suck. We see a lot of people with very low frustration tolerance. I have low frustration tolerance. If I go on the golf course, I'll have a fit if I don't hit well, right? Now, I'm not going out there every day and practicing, and yet for some reason in my mind, I think I should be a good golfer. Well, I'll never be a good golfer if I don't consistently show up every day and practice. And so what we see is inconsistency and a lack of grit. Those people fail.
How does the current economy and interest rates affect this business?
Yeah, I mean, we're interest rate and economically a little bit agnostic because we're paying cash for the properties. So what we'll see in any market cycle is, for example, in 2008 in the Great Recession, it was really easy to buy as people needed money, but it was much more challenging to sell and get your pricing right. As we go from say 2011 to 2018, for example, we had nice equilibrium. Easy to buy, easy to sell. As this market starts to heat up and we have all this money going to the economy in 2020 with stimulus checks, super tough to buy, but really easy to sell, right? Properties flying off the shelves. Today, we're seeing a little more equilibrium than we did before, but we're still seeing it's getting a little more challenging now to sell than in months past. So I think for our niche, the biggest indicator that's going to be like, okay, we're going a challenging market is high unemployment. Because with high unemployment, it's going to be very difficult for people to not only keep paying their notes, but also make acquisitions in the niche. That being said, at the right price, everything sells, but you get spoiled and you're like, oh, this should sell for this. And all of a sudden, you're like, wait, it's not selling. And so that flexibility, that adaptability to markets is super important.
What's the next way that you're going to scale?
So the next way I'm going to scale, I think it's just going to be growing what we're doing and just getting more people as we take on more capital. And with more people, we have more marketing channels and just getting smarter about how we do things and becoming more cutting edge. We're very bullish on AI and chat GPT and those types of technologies. I think technology is making our job so much easier. There's drone technology, mapping technology. Uh, and so it's the best time ever to be an entrepreneur.
What's a unique way you're using AI?
So I think for marketing, for sure, we can use Adobe Photoshop now with AI, and we can take a photo and just generate a photo of raw land. And just as long as we're honest about it and say this is not the actual land, but indicative of what it looks like out there, there's certain things we can do with that, with imagery. But I think for the majority of what we're really doing, we're testing images right now. We're not really actually doing a whole lot with it, but we're testing it and seeing what we can do. But I'd say it's marketing, it's headlines, it's copy, it's calls to action, it's getting the tone right. And so the more detail you give the AI, the better your output. And you also have to kind of go into it like they're an intern. I'm not shipping anything that I'm not copying and pasting anything ChatGPT is giving us. It's just not ready to ship, but it's a really good start and can make us more efficient and save us time, especially with our team.
Yeah. No, I've been messing with it some lately as well for some different things, and it's very interesting. Agree completely. It's like it can give you something to start with, speed the process up of something you're trying to create, right, or copy you're trying to create, but it's still up to this point, it's always needed some tweaking, right,
Yeah,
to a big
yeah.
degree. But what about in a downturn? We briefly hit this just a minute ago, but like, what happens? You're stuck with properties, or what's worst case then? Is if you can't sell, or maybe how long have you had to hold properties? Typically, some of that.
Yeah, so we've had to hold property. I mean, when we're holding property for 90, 120 days, that's a long time for us to hold property. So at that point, usually our metric is if it hasn't sold in 30 days, something has to change. And we have to then start looking at the variables. Is it our headline? Are we not getting enough leads? Is it our pricing? Is it not irresistibly priced? Are we not having a clear enough call to action where people know the next step of what to do? So something needs to change in that marketing for us to start generating more leads and doing that. Sometimes you have to raise the price. Sometimes people think, oh, there must be something wrong with it if this is expensive. Sometimes we need to lower the down payment. Sometimes we need to raise the monthly payment. Sometimes we need to raise the down payment and lower the monthly payment. So we have to isolate certain variables and see what's resonating with the market.
Yeah, it's interesting. You may need to raise the price, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the psychology behind it. And so, what are the typical size of the deals? Are you raising money as well for these deals, or have investors? Is it mostly your own capital?
Yeah, for the longest time, it was my own capital. Now we've gotten to a point where we use other people's money. I talk about this in when you scale, you want to use three levers. So you want to use other people's time, which is going to be virtual assistants. You want to use software and automation, and then you want to use other people's money. And so that's truly the way to scale. And so we do have programs for accredited investors to do that.
Nice. And the size of the deals that you all are typically doing, or like somebody getting started versus where you're at now?
Yeah, if someone getting started, the average size might be 2,500 to $10,000. Uh, our size is probably gonna be a little bit more than that. I mean, we just did a 1,600 acre deal. We're subdividing and putting the roads and the power. So, millions of dollars, but that's not a typical deal.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you can see scaling to that. You're even syndicating this or have investors coming in. What about what's the biggest challenge in your business right now?
I think the biggest challenge right now for us is just creating enough leads on a daily basis where we wanna be doing a deal or 2 a day, and in getting that really fine-tuned and have that marketing machine just more consistent in growing that way. Because we have over 800 properties right now that in inventory, we need to just sell them faster.
800, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And just to hit a few final questions, Mark. You mentioned some metrics earlier, and it's obviously something that you all are big on, and which is great. What would you say is some of a couple of the most important metrics that you track?
I think the most important metric is going to be time on market, number 1, and then also just the marketing piece of it. How many leads to a sale, number 2. Really important metrics. I think the yield is a super important metric. What's the yield on the property? And we do that before on our buy, we kind of figure out, okay, does this even meet our yield requirements? We typically won't do a deal unless we get a minimum 72% yield, which means we're doubling our money every year. So I think those three are really important for us to stay fiscally disciplined and then know that our marketing is effective and just keep getting better at that.
What are some habits that you have, Mark, that produce the highest return for you?
Well, it's so funny. I get hazed a lot about this, but every morning I do breath work and then I get into a very nice, peaceful state of mind after that breath work, and I meditate for at least 20 minutes. And I think it's a great way to start the day. I do love to exercise, but I'd say I'm not as consistent every day with exercise 7 days a week as I am with the breath work and meditation. But I do think there is something to be said about having that equanimity. Being an entrepreneur is brutal. You're gonna have good days, you're gonna have bad days, and, to be too high to too low, I think just keeping that equanimity and realizing every moment is precious really helps me enjoy the journey much more than feeling like a mental pinball machine and the outside world just hit me around.
And how do you like to give back?
So I like to give back by helping people solve their time and money problems and teaching them this business. That's my number one way of giving back. As far as charity, I like a group called Effective Altruism and the idea of just what's going to get the biggest bang for your buck to alleviate human suffering. And then one of my mentors has a foundation called balltoall.org as well. These are $10 indestructible soccer balls that he sends to kids throughout the world that are in impoverished nations, and they stay out of trouble. They're playing soccer, and the soccer balls are indestructible.
Love that. Wow. Thanks for giving back in that way, Mark. And I'll look up the ball to all. I want to learn a little more about that. But incredible. I'm just grateful for you being willing to lay out building and scaling, because that can apply to any entrepreneurial business almost, right? And it's the who, not how. That book from Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, I highly recommend that as well. But it's obvious the importance that you put, Mark, on tracking metrics, right? And knowing those things. I think that helps you make key decisions, right? All the time, right? And improvements, no doubt about it. But just helping lay out what this land flipping process looks like, the team that you need, being able to scale it, and just some of the automations I think are key too. When you start something like that, it can be so overwhelming, right? Well, which platform or which mentor, even which team members do we need, and the website, all these skills that we think we have to have, and sometimes some of them we may not need, and some of them we may need, like you talked about. But so grateful to have you back on the show again. I know you have another book coming out in the near future. If you can, tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you and the book.
Yeah, I think the best place to start is thelandgeek.com, thelandgeek.com. And I'm sure we'll have a URL to get you the book, Dirt Rich 2, How to Scale Your Land Business Without Missing a Beat. And then certainly, I think it's if you go to landgeek.com/dirt rich, you can get the book for free there as well. Just pay for the shipping.
Thank you for being with us again today. I hope that you have learned a lot from the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you're telling your friends about the Real Estate Syndication Show and how they can also build wealth in real estate. You can also go to lifebridgecapital.com and start investing today.